Okay, so today we're going through 11.5, which is also the last spread of chapter 11 and only 3 slides long. So a very short spread and a very basic concept as well, looking at this idea of the health system and how we can actually lodge complaints, because all this chapter and all of a bit of last chapter as well, we've been looking mostly at Australia's healthcare system. We've been looking at how we can access doctors. We've been looking at Medicare. We've been looking at what services are available in the community. So what we're doing now is we are looking at this idea that, okay, we have all these services available in our community, but we have to remember that just because we have a healthcare system that comparatively on a global scale is pretty good, it doesn't mean that this health system is without its flaws. Okay, obviously our health system has many flaws. Okay, one medical center might be a better quality than others. If you Google 2 different medical centers online, you'll find that sometimes one has better reviews than another one, which is funny because you wouldn't think people review medical centers and things like that, but they do. If you Google 2 different hospitals, you realize that one hospital might have more stars in terms of a review than the other hospital. Okay, this is because the service that is provided at different healthcare providers or different healthcare centers or hospitals or medical centers can be different. Okay, some medical centers are renowned for having good service. Okay, some medical centers are renowned for having good doctors who take the time to get to know the patients, whereas other medical centers might not have that same reputation. So when you get into a situation where you visit a medical center and you don't feel as though you were treated with respect, you don't feel as though you were given the kind of treatment, those kind of rights that we talked about earlier in the chapter, those kind of rights that you were supposed to be given, you can actually make a complaint. Okay, you can actually complain about that service to a specific organization or a specific body. And that's the main thing that we're focusing on in today's spread. Okay, so when we're looking at complaints about health services, I don't know why, wait 1 second. Why does it do that? I don't know why. Okay, let me make that bigger again. I don't know why the font size always changes. Anyway, complaints about health services. So when we're looking at this idea of, when I visit a health service, remembering that a health service could be anything. It could be a psychologist. Well, I'll get a little text box up. When we say health service, we're basically talking about like doctors, we're talking about hospitals, we're talking about a psychologist, we're talking about like a physiotherapist, a dietitian, whatever it is, okay, etc., etc. All of those are classified as health services. So it's really important for us to remember that as we're talking about this, because you need to understand and remember what are the different kind of services that you can make complaints against, okay, if you require to do that. Anyway, the patient, obviously, as a part of your rights to be able to have healthcare with respect, to be able to be treated well, to be able to have your health information confidential and not disclosed to anyone else, you also have the right to complain, okay, under proper and reasonable grounds. Obviously, you can't just complain about anything, but if you feel like one of your rights has been infringed upon or violated, you do have the right to complain if you've got a legitimate reason, okay? Now, in Victoria, there's a specific body or a specific organization called the Health Complaints Commissioner, or we call them HCC for short. Okay, and that's a Victoria specific thing. So if you go to a different state, it'll be a different body or organization there. Now, the HCC is an independent, fee-free organization. They have to be independent and not affiliated with any other companies or organizations, because otherwise they might be biased. For example, if the HCC was working in conjunction with, I don't know, the Hospitals Association of Victoria or something like that, they would be very biased. That is, if someone was to complain about a specific hospital, the HCC might not give a proper ruling or a proper judgment, okay, or a proper support for that person who's making the complaint, because they have a personal connection with hospitals. So the HCC is independent for that reason. They're fee-free, which means you don't have to pay money to make a complaint. It's something that's free. It's a part of your rights as an individual living in Victoria and having access to these healthcare services. So it's fee-free. And their main role is to receive complaints. And if those complaints are approved and they're seen as legitimate and justified, they need to also be able to resolve those complaints. Okay. And this is done using a process that is unbiased. As I said before, no personal agenda, no personal biases, completely fair Okay, and it's confidential as well. So if I complain about a medical center, and just let's say hypothetically, I have maybe an uncle, or I have maybe a distant relative that works in that medical center. If I have a complaint against that specific person and I don't want them to find out, if I make that complaint to HCC, that doctor who I'm maybe distantly related to will never ever find out that I was the one who made that complaint. Okay, or that complaint came from a patient who visited him on Monday evening, for him to be able to then determine and work backwards that it was me. So no kind of information will ever be disclosed about who made the complaint. And for that reason, it's confidential. And again, the fact that it's fee-free means that you don't have to pay a lot of money for it. It's affordable. And the fact that it's confidential also encourages people that if you have been treated unfairly, there is no reason as to why you can't come forward and make a complaint. It's just to ensure that your rights are being met when it comes to accessing healthcare. Now, the HCC manage complaints related to a wide range of reasons. Okay, when we talk about legitimate reasons, these are some of the reasons we can talk about. You don't need to learn all of them. Maybe just learn any 3. Remembering that most of these reasons are kind of like general knowledge as well. Generally things that you would pick out if you went to a healthcare service or healthcare provider. So for example, access to services, okay, quality and safety, care and attention that is given to you, respect, dignity and consideration, communication about treatment, options and costs, level of involvement in healthcare decisions, access, privacy, confidentiality, and complaint handling. Now, I'll just quickly unpack what some of these mean, because some of them are not so obvious. The first one, access to services, both refers to the actual service that's being provided, like, for example, a GP, as well as other amenities within that center or within that healthcare provider area. If you go to a hospital and there are no functioning toilets or bathrooms within that hospital, that is a major issue. And that is something that you can complain about to the actual HCC. Same thing with a medical center or a psychologist. If you don't have access to those basic amenities that are required in any building, you can actually make a complaint about that. Okay, quality and safety. If you're in a waiting room sitting in a medical center and there are people who, there are like, there's water on the floor and people have almost slipped and you've seen this for the past 30 minutes, you've been waiting and no one's come to clean it up, you can make a complaint about that and say that people in this particular medical center are at risk of falling and breaking a bone because no one's actually coming up to clean up the spill. Okay, care and attention. Have you been left to wait in the medical center for more than 2 hours without any further kind of, without any further like being talked to or being, discussed with in terms of when are you actually going to be called in? If that's the case, you can make a complaint. Okay, dignity and consideration. Have you been made to feel like second rate? Have you been made to feel like you don't deserve the treatment, or like you are, like, if you're talking about some issue that you have you been made to feel like you are crazy, or have you been made to feel like you don't know what you're talking about? If that's the case, then you can make a complaint. Okay, so those are the basic ideas when we're talking about complaints about health services. Okay, anything that you think doesn't sit right in terms of a person accessing a health service, or the experience that they have either while they're waiting to be called into the room or either while they're actually in the room, all of those things can actually come up. And obviously more extreme cases of mistreatment like harassment, abuse, all that stuff goes to a higher body, but first goes through the HCC as well. But again, those things will require further involvement because those are more extreme. Okay, but these are the basic complaints we can think about. Okay, so I'm just gonna get rid of all the scribbles on this page and then we'll move on to the next one. So these are the people, I mentioned some of them already in the previous slide, but these are the kinds of services that you can make complaints about, okay? You can make complaints about doctors, dentists, nurses. So any of these people, if they have mistreated you when you have gone to get treatment done, or they haven't treated you with respect, or they haven't told you the clear cost of the treatment, or they said, oh, this this tooth filling is going to cost you $100, but then they charge $600, you can make a complaint about that. Okay, so doctors, dentists, nurses, surgeons, midwives, literally almost any of these like healthcare providers that you can think about can basically have a complaint made against them. Okay, you don't have to know all of them, just know any 3. Okay, these are registered health practitioners. You've also got non-registered health practitioners. Non-registered means that they're not on a specific board or not a part of a specific association. Okay, for example, when you become a doctor, you have to sign on to a specific association, which is the Medical Association of Australia. Same thing with dentists. You've got a dentist association. Same thing with midwives. Okay, so non-registered health practitioners are not associated with a specific board or a specific association, but they still practice and provide healthcare. So we're talking about audiologists, which deal with ear-related issues and hearing, naturopaths, dietitians, speech pathologists, homeopaths, which are similar to naturopaths, counselors, paramedics, masseurs, which are remedial massage, alternative therapists, and other providers of general health services. So these are all your non-registered health practitioners. They're not on a specific board or not affiliated with a specific organization, but they still provide your basic health care. Okay, and you can still make complaints against them. Okay, now, obviously, just because we know that we have the right to complain doesn't mean that we should complain, okay? Especially if it's something that we can talk about with the actual organization. And that's what this point is about here. Okay, if I see the spill in the waiting room, rather than sitting there for like 2 hours and just fuming with anger, looking at the spill and not actually telling the receptionist about it, I could just get up as soon as I see the spill and be like, hey, there's a spill there. Can you get someone to clean it up? And then the issue is resolved and you don't even need to go to the HCC anymore. Okay, so obviously where solutions and a resolution can be made between the patient and the actual healthcare provider directly, that's always better for everyone involved, because it means that less time is wasted and less resources are wasted. And we can focus more time onto dealing with more extreme cases or issues like harassment and things like that. Okay, so that's obviously one of the reasons or one of the things we need to remember. Just because we can complain doesn't mean we should always complain, especially if it's a minor and fixable kind of issue. Okay, the last slide here is looking at the complaint process. So basically just showing you guys what kind of journey your complaint would take. The first thing that happens is that, let's say that I'm the patient in the purple, okay, and the red color one is the provider. Let's say that they're a doctor, okay, just because that's the most common example. And let's say this is me as the patient. Okay, I have a complaint now. Something has happened. I have a complaint. Maybe, let's say the doctor released my medical records without my permission. Released my medical records. Okay, and obviously that is a breach of confidentiality or privacy. Okay, and obviously I'm not happy about this. I am extremely furious. So what's going to happen now? Basically, I'm going to go down this process. And number one, I will lodge the complaint with the HCC, which is our Health Complaints Commissioner. The complaint is lodged. Okay. At this point, the HCC assesses my complaint to see, is it a legitimate complaint? Is it legitimate, or is it basically just kind of like very minor? Is it something that they need to intervene? Confidentiality is a big issue. And obviously that's something the HCC will be like, yes, it is pretty legitimate. It is something that we need to look into. It's not something that can just be discussed between the patient and doctor anymore. We need to step in. Okay, so the HCC steps in, and you can see in this particular scenario now, the HCC is in the middle. They're kind of the mediator. I'm on one side as the patient and the doctor is on the other side. And the HCC is basically mediating between, you know how when you have a conflict and you have two sides and there's a person in the middle who kind of mediates or who kind of tries to get the two to resolve the issue? That's kind of the role of the HCC in this scenario. And so a number of different outcomes can come as a result of this, depending on how cooperative the healthcare provider is. Do they actually accept their fault or do they deny it? How willing the patient is. Some patients are happy to just come to an early resolution and basically just fix the issue as soon as possible and move on with their life. Some patients require a more formal resolution, okay, which might actually end up involving, lawsuits or courts and that kind of stuff. In all aspects, though, some might require an even more formal investigation that might lead to the doctor even losing his license, okay? So again, this is like showing you less serious, medium level of seriousness, the most serious kind of investigation there, okay? In all of these three cases, whether it's a very quick resolution we come to, or whether it's a more deliberated and more extensive investigation that takes place, in all cases, you can see that an outcome is always reached. Okay, there's always an outcome or a solution that is agreed upon at the end. And what happens at the end is that the HCC then goes back to their database, they record the date of the complaint, and they record the date and time in which the outcome was made, and they get the signatures of both parties, and they're like, okay, now move on with your lives. That's it, we're done. Okay, so that's the basic journey of the complaint. Now, that's a lot of steps. So you're not going to be asked to actually kind of draw this flow chart up. You're not going to be asked to fill in any boxes. We're not going to give you like a fill in the blanks option or anything for this. What we only want you to understand is that the HCC exists to take on complaints that are given to them by patients, regardless of what healthcare provider or healthcare service that patient has accessed. Okay, you don't need to know the itty-gritty details like early resolution, formal resolution. You just need to know the HCC takes on a complaint, and eventually they work with the patient and the doctor, or the patient and the healthcare provider, to reach an outcome. Okay, that's the basic idea that you need to know, and that they do this in a quick way, a fair way, and an effective way, because their main thing is to resolve the complaint as quick as possible in a way that's cooperative, where both parties can cooperate and where the progress is constructive rather than destructive. So it's not like the doctor should be attacking me or I should be attacking the doctor. It should be done in a very mature and kind of logical way. Okay, now some of the more specific outcomes, or like what would that look in real life? It could be an explanation. The doctor could say, oh, well, this is the thing. It was actually a database issue. It was a technical error. I didn't mean for it to happen. He could explain, or she could explain what actually happened, why it happened, an apology. You know, on behalf of Truganina Medical Center, I apologize for the disclosing of these medical records, and then give a justification. Access to other treatment, access or amendment to health records. So maybe moving the health records that were already disclosed to a more reliable server, or to a more reliable area where they are less likely to be compromised. Okay, so these are just some examples there of the specific outcomes. The outcome, remember, is the eventual solution, or the eventual resolution that is reached by both parties. Okay, that's the HCC complaint process. Okay, and you can use the word HCC in your SAC or exam. You don't have to write Health Complaints Commissioner, but if we ask you for what HCC stands for, then yes, you will need to write the full name of Health Complaints Commissioner. Okay, I think that's all the content for today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording here.